Welcome back, you guys. I'm so excited because we have had Philip Folsom on the show before, but never in person. It's the first time in the studio. We had you on via Skype. Do you remember that?
I do.
And we love him. In fact, so many people at CARD love him because I mentioned that the last 2 summers we've gone on retreat and put ourselves in the hands of Fulcrum. And we're going to talk more about that later, but we really put ourselves in the hands of Philip and his team, and he has valuable hands. He has their healing hands. I would definitely say that. So we all love Philip here. And this summer, while we were on retreat, you and I had a brief conversation. I said, Philip, you got to come back on the show. And you said, okay, I have something I really want to come and talk about. I really want to come and talk about something called the Sparta Project. And I only had time to hear like 2 sentences, and I went, yes, please come and talk about this, because I can see all the different ways that this connects to the autism community. But start by telling us what the Sparta Project is and what it does.
The SpartaProject.org is basically a war detox. It means it's a 5-day residential program for veterans, first responders, police, fire, who are dealing with PTS. And one of the symptoms of that is a very high suicide rate.
Yeah.
And so our program is a very holistic way of rebooting and processing out a lot of that toxicity and trauma and giving people a shot at their lives back.
Yeah, you're saving lives.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. And I, earlier in the week when I said, okay, we're having Philip Folsom on and he's going to talk about veterans and stress and suicide, and only one person said, isn't your show about autism? I don't. And I went, yeah, you don't see how that all connects. So for anybody who doesn't get it, let me just say, and I think most of you do, those of us who are parents, we experience something that even science has shown that it's akin to post-traumatic stress. And so many of our viewers, so many of our parents are both mom and dad, or mom or dad, are serving in the military. And honestly, when I think about our kiddos, so many of our viewers now have kiddos that are teenagers and young adults, and we know that they're going through some very stressful situations at school and sometimes have incidences which cause a PTS kind of thing going on with them as well. And we need to be talking about this. As a community, we all need to be talking about this. I had said earlier that pretty much every week we have a story where a parent there'll be a murder-suicide where they'll have a child who's on the spectrum. They will take their own life, but first take their child's life. And it's devastating, unthinkable to so many of us. And people get very angry and say, well, that, it's murder. And I happen to agree with that, but we have to acknowledge that there is a mental issue going on with that parent. So often we hear that the parent is somebody who was loving and kind and not abusive to their child. And if we as a society don't deal with what happened leading up to that, it's a disservice to everyone. So talk to us, Philip, about your background. You're a veteran, yes?
I am.
And so these are things that you probably know a little bit about.
Yeah, I'm a veteran, and I'm also somebody who's been deeply immersed in the mental health leadership development community for 25 years. And what I'm seeing is this is not a veteran situation. It's not an inner city conversation. This is a societal conversation. And I think I have naturally gravitated towards the veterans because being one, it strikes dear to my heart. But there's also another component with veterans, is that I equate them to kind of this polar bear a role, in that there's a lot of things going extinct right now. Every day we're losing a species. And we don't really care about the things that are not sexy. But we care about the polar bears because they're big and sexy, and they're an apex predator, and they're all these things. So if we can save the polar bear, then there's that trophic cascade, which means that everything gets saved. So the veterans fulfill that role for us. So there's a sea of goodwill. There's people who are outraged when a veteran takes his life. Whereas we're seeing a very similar PTS rate, suicide rate with our inner city, but it's not quite as grabby to mass middle America. as our veteran conversation is.
Yeah.
So if we can pivot some of our best minds and our resources and our wisdom and love into this veteran conversation and our firefighters, our police, our first responders, then we have an opportunity to expand and force and multiply that healing out into the rest of our society, because it really is a societal conversation. There is something that is toxic about our current state of affairs. And Krishnamurti, he said, it is no measure of health to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society. And we've been born into that condition, and so we don't really even see it because we've been swimming in that water since we were born. And I have an analogy that I use where I have noticed that I have seen seagulls my whole life, but I have never seen any baby seagulls.
Yeah.
And so what the baby seagulls are is this blind spot about the way that we treat each other, the way we deal authentically with diversity and the people who are different than us, the way we deal with trauma, anxiety, depression, and the whole scope of mental challenges. And it really is a spiritual conversation in many ways, which people are afraid to use that word even.
Yeah.
But the word psychology is not the study of the brain. It's the study of your soul. That's psychology. So ultimately there is this soul healing conversation that has to do with us as not only individuals, but as a society in general. And I think that's the Holy Grail.
Yeah. And you can see why we love to be around Philip, because you just feel better around Philip always. But so I want to get back to the Sparta Project, because clearly you're finding things that work. And that's really what we want to talk about, because as you were saying, we can spread that across everyone. So describe for me, it's 5 days, did you say?
And I think our knee-jerk reaction to all of our problems